First, I would like to say that I am not an attorney and this should in no way be taken as legal advice. With that being said, I am talking about the law, and you can do with this information what you will. Everybody has their own free will. This video will be about taxes. So first, let's take a look at what this country looked like back in 1912, when everything was paid for by tariffs. We had public schools all around this country. Kids growing up, they didn't have calculators back then. They were taught how to do real problem solving. And probably a high school graduate coming out of high school in 1912 had a lot better English skills, especially proper English skills, than I would say a high school student did coming out of high school graduation in 2012. I don't think that's too far-fetched to imagine. Next, we had infrastructure. We had railroads that crisscrossed this country, going from New York to LA to San Francisco to Atlanta. We had roads crossing this country. We had hospitals and ambulances. We had very good inner-city public transportation with trolley cars, subways, and here are some stats from New York State or New York City where they almost moved 1 billion people in 1911. This was all paid for by tariffs, and that is a tax or a duty on imports or exports. Here's a Time magazine article about tariffs, and they talk about why we needed to establish a personal income tax. And of course, everything that they give is public schools and infrastructure. They also have the audacity to talk about how we needed social insurance to save people who didn't do that well in the market. I don't know how good of a job that we did on that, considering every time the market fails, the banks end up leaving the citizens with a bill. Now, let's take a look at Germany's history, particularly right after World War II. When Germany lost World War II, this is a little known fact, but not just military personnel, civilians as well were forced into forced labor camps. Joseph Stalin wanted 4 million people all by himself. The United States had close to 750,000. And those were just the two biggest countries. But I could say we could roughly say between 5 and 6 million people were put into forced labor camps. And it was not just military personnel. It was civilians as well. Back in Germany in 1945, after World War II, the German population was close to what it was in 1910, which was around 64.6 or pretty much 65 million people. So roughly 1 out of every 12 or 1 out of every 13 people, civilians included, was forced into a labor camp. Now this was mainly the world judging these people for allowing their government to do runaway atrocities and horrific things to the world and the people of the world. And so the people who allowed their government to do that, they were the ones who got punished, theoretically. So now let's take a look at the United States. The United States has admitted to war crimes. They've admitted to torturing. They have admitted to murdering. They have admitted to spending $81 million for psychological help with committing these war crimes, with committing torture. They have also admitted to spying on all of the citizens, tapping your cell phone calls and your emails. And people who blow the whistle on the government for speaking out against their war crimes, they end up getting thrown in prison somehow. Even though this government has admitted to war crimes and spying on its own citizens, the citizenship of this government has still been willing to sponsor them. Here's the definition of sponsor: a person or organization that provides funds for a project or activity carried out by another in particular. And that's what you're doing when you are paying the government and they are telling you that they are committing these war crimes. Here's the definition for accessory: anything which is joined to another thing as an ornament, or to render it more perfect, or which accompanies it, or is connected with it as an incident, or as subordinate to it, or which belongs to or with it. And when you're paying taxes to the government, you belong with the government. You are subordinate to the government. And you are accompanying them in the war crimes that they are committing. This is Title 18, U.S. Code, subsection 2441, War Crimes. And when we come down here to D, Common Article 3 violations, 1, means any conduct as follows. A. Torture: the act of a person who commits or conspires or attempts to commit an act specifically intended to inflict severe physical or mental pain or suffering upon a person within his custody or physical control. Didn't the CIA spend $81 million, or the government spend $81 million to inflict mental pain and suffering more effectively? B. Cruel or inhumane treatment: the act of a person who commits or conspires or attempts to commit an act intended to inflict severe or serious physical or mental pain or suffering upon another within his custody or control. So, 2 times mental pain or suffering, and they spent money and tell the American public that they spent money on doing this. So if I had signed the contract with the IRS, I never have and I never will, but if I had and I was trying to get out of it, I would simply tell the IRS that the government is acting illegally and unlawfully with the money that I pay in tax dollars. And because I do not want to break the more serious crime of being an accessory to war crimes and murder, I'm going to have to not pay them. So really, you gotta break the law either way. So this is just a crisis of conscience. Would you rather pay the government to commit their war crimes? Or would you rather tell them that you do not want to commit the more serious crime, so you have to withhold your taxes? You gotta keep your money. That way you can spend the money for yourself, because you don't want to be held accountable for those war crimes. So which law would you rather break? Think about it. Seriously. Anyways, my next video will be on how they get us to step into their special proceedings, which are statutory proceedings. They trick us out of the common law courts. Thanks for watching, and I hope you stay tuned. Postscript. This comes from the book The Decline of the American Republic. Like all others, this is a creeping invasion. In 1932, the federal government gave $33.4 million to the states for teacher education. In 1951, it gave $137.4 million for teacher training. It distributed $2.55 billion in 1951 for general education. It took huge sums out of the states in taxes and then handed back a fraction for education. The government has no secret hoard from which to conjure taxes. Taxes can come only from the people in the states, and the federal government always takes from the states, no matter what the purpose, more than it returns. It seeks to bribe teachers and parents with their own money.